Welcome back to part 2 of long COVID fatigue. I'm Dr. Tim Robinson, formerly a family doctor for 30 years, now Long COVID Services for 5 years. I've been posting on podcast channels and YouTube. I hope they're helpful. If you like them, click subscribe. I have to add my usual disclaimer. Any advice or treatment I mention should only be considered after discussion with your doctor. In part 1, I talked about the causes and various aspects of long COVID fatigue. Here we are in part 2. I'll talk about how we are going to tackle it. So, how to tackle it? What are our objectives? Basically, we want to build energy reserves and reduce energy drains. Our energy levels are low. Our recharge levels are low. We can't do what we used to be able to do, so physically, mentally, socially, as our energy levels run out quicker. We need to know how to manage this. We need to know what our energy level limits are, what our capacity is, how big the battery is, and how much we can do. So how do we get to know how big your energy battery is? One handy way to do it is to do an activity diary, to use the traffic light system. So you classify tasks as either low, medium or high energy requirers. Okay, so you can label those as sort of a green, amber or red light. So that helps you know your limits. So for each task, ask yourself, is this a green, amber or red light? Okay, this brings awareness for energy usage and saving. So if you boom and bust and crash, okay, you ask yourself after you've done the task, was that a green, amber or red? Did I exceed my limits? So if it's yes, I exceeded my limits, for next time to avoid another bust, another crash. So you know about your energy needs. You now need to know about your energy management. And this brings us to what you really need to know, and that is the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps stand for plan, prioritize, pace, and power. Basically, the 4 Ps are going to be your new default setting going forward. So let's look at them each in turn. So first P, planning. So essentially you've got to plan before you do. Plan the task. Is it a green task, amber task, red task? Okay. Is it a low, medium or high energy requiring task? So what does it involve? Essentially you've got to think it through before you do. Plan before you do. Not only plan before you do, but also you've got to plan your day. You've got to be strict with get-up times, strict with meal times, strict with sort of mid-morning and mid-afternoon breaks. You've got to incorporate that, weave that into your morning, your afternoon. 15, 20, 30 minutes doing nothing, just resting, maybe listening to a bit of music, just sort of like just looking out the window, just relaxing, doing nothing. Okay, time out. You've also got to be strict with bedtime. You've got to have that fixed in your mind. You've got to use that, in a way, self-discipline with this time and this structured day. You've got to be strict with yourself and others. It's a really important part of this whole process of managing your long COVID fatigue. So planning, that's the first P. Moving on to the second P, prioritize. Okay, so again, let's look at the tasks. Look at the tasks that in the morning, you've got it on your list as to what you would like to achieve in that day, your list of tasks. Okay, so you've got to order them according to the energy required. So obviously, high energy requiring task, red light, your needs to go at the top, green light down the bottom. So time of day, obviously, first thing, when you're still fresh and alert, okay, you need to do the task that's going to demand more energy. And then green tasks can come later. Sounds like common sense, because it is common sense. Sounds obvious, because actually it is obvious. But, you've got to be strict on that as to figuring out which order you're going to be putting your tasks. An aid to that prioritization is what we call the 4Ds. You've got I'm working my way through the 4Ps. How about the 4Ds? Well, the 4Ds are do, delay, delegate, and dump. Okay. So if you think of a task, a specific task, ask yourself, which of the 4Ds? Is it a D for do? You must do that task. Is it D for delay? Yeah, actually it could wait a little bit. Or is it a task that you could give to someone else to do? So delegate, D for delegate. Or is it a task that actually doesn't need to be done? Is it something that you could dump, D for dump, bin it? Okay, so think of the 4Ds when you're prioritizing. Moving on now to the third P, P for pace, pacing. This is the big one. So again, think of a task. Think to yourself, remember, the planning bit, think before you do, but also think about the task in detail. Think about it. And how, is it a task that actually completed in one fell swoop? Or is it a task that actually probably need to break down into small chunks? Okay, so if you do, yes, small chunks, and then you can have a rest break between those chunks. And you've got to think about how to go about that. How am I going to be strict to myself to have those rest breaks? When can I say stop, rest, and then resume? Simple analogy, example is, say, vacuuming the house. Okay, well, as a big task, depending on how many rooms you've got in the house, of course. But, okay, so say you've got 6 rooms. So maybe do 2 rooms and then have a break, have a rest, okay? And then return to the tasks due to the second chunk, another 2-3 rooms. So what you've done is you've broken the task of vacuuming the house into 2 chunks, haven't you? Couple of rooms, rest, couple of rooms. Use that as a sort of a simple example. You've also got to ask yourself, how am I going to stop myself pushing on through? Let's get it done. That attitude, which is human nature. You just want to get it done, tick that task, move on to the next one. But actually, you've got to start getting strong with yourself. That self-discipline thing. You've got to say to yourself, you've got to ask yourself, how am I going to stop myself pushing on through? How am I going to deal with, actually, if you don't complete the task? So, that can be a challenge. You've got to take control, and you've got to say, stop, finish it tomorrow if you haven't done it today. So pacing's really important. Remember, small chunks, and be strong, and make sure that you introduce those breaks. And then finally, the fourth P for power to yourself. Okay. So you've got to be able to be strong with yourself and say, look, okay, no, those negative thoughts, I must, I should, I ought to, no, say no to those, no one's judging you. Say no to feeling guilty if you haven't completed a task, for example. Say no to a setback if, you've actually busted and crashed, and you're disappointed because of that, or because you haven't achieved what you wanted to achieve in your task list. Okay. Say no to those. Okay. So, but, say yes to a break. Yes, I'm going to have a break now. Yes. Or say yes to a treat. Actually, I earned this. I'm going to give myself some time out, and I'm going to have a coffee and a biscuit. I earned this. Say yes to control and power to the self. Tell yourself that, look, I am in control here. Long COVID is not in control of me. I'm in control of it. I'll do it in my own time. Power to yourself. Power to self. So you've got the 4 P's in play. That's jolly good. Okay, but actually, we've got to think of a plan B. Okay, why? Well, sometimes plans don't go to plan. Things don't go to plan. So it's inevitable that life never does actually, in normal life, in non-COVID life, non-long COVID life, basically life never really does go to plan, does it? So you do need a plan B, and you've got to ask yourself, what is your plan B? So if you didn't finish a task, you've got to accept where you got to. You can maybe rethink the task. Well, how am I going to tackle it differently, say, tomorrow? What's your new goal? So if you do have a setback, it's not a big deal. Okay, you've busted, you've crashed, all right. But, take this on board. It's temporary. You're not back to square one. No, you learn from that setback. This is the time you think to yourself, okay, let me just check the 4 P's. Did I use the 4 D's? Okay. You learn for the triggers. What triggered this setback? Okay. And therefore, you've learned. You've known for next time. So just say, look, that's a problem. That's at the moment. That's a disappointment. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. Tomorrow's another day. What else can I do for myself? That's such a frequent question that I've heard so many times over the 5 years of doing long COVID. What can I do to speed things up? What can I do to get better quickly, doc? Right, reasonable question because it's dragging on. So basically, long COVID, remember, long COVID is multi-causal. I've been through the causal list in part 1. There's many causes, direct and indirect. And it's multi-symptom. Okay, so many symptoms, up to 200 symptoms. And it's across all the systems of the body, the cardiovascular, neurological, the gastrointestinal, the skin system, that, all across all the systems, the endocrine system, the blood system. So it's all the systems. So being so complex, so complicated, it's no surprise that there's no silver bullet, no one silver bullet that is going to suddenly bring about a transformation and well-being and normal health instantaneously. No, there is no one single silver bullet. A lot of patients sort of out of desperation turn to supplements. I totally get it. I totally understand. And, if I didn't know what I know, I think I'd probably do the same out of desperation. Just got to get better. I can do anything. So what are people doing? People are getting themselves vitamin B3, so niacin. Why? Well, it's very reasonable. Niacin is part of something nicotinamide, which is part of the metabolic process for creating energy in the mitochondria. So the thought process obviously is, right, let's top that up. Let's make sure we've got lots of that on board to make more energy. Well, yes, I see that thought process, but actually I think that's a bit optimistic because, like I've said, long COVID is far more complex than just a problem happening in the mitochondria. Again, I gave you the list in part 1. Likewise, coenzyme Q10. So CoQ10. Again, it's one of the components and cofactors within the energy producing cycle, the Krebs cycle, the TCI cycle, oxidative phosphorylation for energy production within mitochondria. So a lot of people take CoQ10, coenzyme Q10, again, for the same reasons. Top up the, fuel the mitochondria. Well, yes, I see the logic behind that, but probably it's not going to make the difference. And then there's NAC, so that's N-acetylcysteine, which is a sort of a combination of 3 amino acids, which again is part of the creation of a lot of the nuclear material, so the DNA material. There's D-ribose, again, which is a cellulose, it's a pentose ring cellulose in the diet, from your normal foodstuffs, from protein sources and dairy. And it's important, and it goes into DNA, into RNA, and it's part of the ATP, the energy currency molecule. So you think to yourself, well, okay, if you have more of that in supply, therefore it's going to create more energy and bring about more sort of cell replacement and repair. Well, yes, I see the logic behind that, but actually in isolation, it's probably not going to make the difference. So all of those that are listed are non-herbal, and they do have some sort of evidence-based medicine behind them, small studies, and they're quite weak studies, weakly positive, that is. However, there is evidence that those supplements can bring about some improvements of your long COVID symptoms. They're also, so like I said, those are non-herbal. There are herbal supplements, again, that some of them have some evidence-based medicine. There's something called pycnogenol, which is derived from pine trees, from a specific pine tree from Cyprus. There's quercetin in the skins of fruit specifically, but also vegetables, which is a naturally occurring polyphenol, so an antioxidant, which plants have as their defense against bacteria and sort of other toxins. So there is evidence that brings some improvement to long COVID symptoms. There are a couple of others, something called Phyto-5, which was researched and wasn't very convincing. Nattokinase is another supplement that people use to help break down the microthrombi, the microclots. It's a naturally occurring, it's derived from fermented soya, and it is a fibrinolytic, it's a protease inhibitor. It breaks down the fibrin mesh that creates these microthrombi. So we have a number of patients who take this. Again, it's not backed up by medical research, but people can do what they want. You can get all these on the internet. So, but obviously beware. And with anything herbal, really important to beware, especially if you are on conventional medication, because herbal products can upset the normal absorption of of your conventional medications. Either way, they can reduce the effectiveness of your conventional medication. So that conventional medication that is serving a purpose, like reducing your blood pressure, may not work so well. So your blood pressure will go up whilst you're on your herbal. Likewise, some herbal supplements can cause overactivity of your medication. So that medication can go into the toxic range. So again, beware of that. I usually say to patients, well, you can do what you want, really. I've given you my advice. And yes, long COVID is much more complicated than just taking a silver bullet, which isn't a silver bullet. It's not going to cure it. But if you want to, then it's up to you. But my advice is always going to be, trial them individually. And, ask yourself after taking them for like 3-4 weeks, ask yourself, well, am I better, worse, or exactly the same? But obviously if you're better, your symptoms are better, your long COVID symptoms are better, your fatigue is better, for example, you're going to probably want to carry on with them. If they're worse, obviously you're going to want to, you're going to want to stop it. Okay, if you're feeling worse with this supplement, you're going to want to stop it. But if you feel exactly the same, actually it's not making any difference. After 3 or 4 weeks, chances of making a difference thereafter, probably pretty slim. So I would actually encourage the patients to stop taking the supplement at that time. And if they want to, try another one. And ask yourself again, am I better, worse, or exactly the same after 3 to 4 weeks? So it's up to you. But remember, as always, don't exceed the doses that the manufacturers recommend on their instructions on the box. Read the label. So, what do we know? Basically, progression out of long COVID fatigue is slow. Yes, it is slow, but it is possible. As long as you use your 4 Ps, your planning, your prioritizing, your pacing, and your power to self. If you use those. So first, what are we saying? We're saying, find your baseline. As I said, become aware of your limits. Okay. And that awareness can be arrived at by using an activity diary. Find your level. Then start to move from that, what you're doing, up in small incremental increases from that level. Okay, because a lot of patients say to me, okay, well, I really get this, the 4 Ps, and I know my limits, etc. The energy envelope, as they call it. Don't really know what an energy envelope is. I think that translates to limits. No, I know my limit, but when can I make it? When can I increase it a little bit, and how much, and how often, etc. This is a common question that a lot of patients ask, and justifiably, they want to see some progress. Okay, so like I said, it's small incremental increases from that level. Check for boom and bust. Check for bust and crash. More specifically, check for post-exertional malaise when you have made that small incremental increase in what you're doing. So ask that question. God, have I busted here? Am I crashed? Or do I still feel okay? Good. Okay. I think the important thing is, yes, just keep with those small incremental increases. Don't be greedy. Don't be impatient. Too much too soon. No. So in a way, after each of those increases, wait a few days or even a week before you go for the next small incremental increase. Okay, using the lamppost analogy. Okay, so you take yourself out, walking along the street. Day 1, you walk as far as the next lamppost, 30 paces, say. And you get there, and then you walk back. That was day 1. And do the same for the next day, for that week. Okay, so you say to yourself, well, I'm achieving that because at the end of that, each of those 30 paces out, 30 paces back, I've not crashed, I've not busted, I don't have post-exertional malaise. This is good news. So then after a week, you say to yourself, right, okay, small increase. Go to the next lamppost number 2. So 30 paces to the first one, 30 paces to the second one, 30 paces back, and then another 30 paces out. Ask yourself at the end of that, how do I feel? Next morning, how do I feel? Have I got post-exertional malaise? Have I busted? Have I crashed? No. Fantastic. Right. Next day, what do? Second lamppost again. Third day, second lamppost again, and back. Okay, end of that week. Hey, this is great. I've not busted. I've not crashed. I haven't got post-exertional malaise. Right. Let's go to the third lamppost. You get the picture. So it's slowly catch your monkey. Okay? Just don't be greedy. Don't be impatient. I know it's difficult. With each increase, don't forget to praise yourself. Hold on. You've made progress. This is fantastic. This is really positive. It's encouraging. It's success. So give yourself a treat. Pat yourself on the back. Okay. Gratitude to self, as they talk about. Okay. So you're slowly building it up. Whilst I'm talking about this slowly building up, I want to just touch on a sensitive topic. And that is this thing called graded exercise therapy. Now, you may have heard about this. About 20 years ago, this was introduced as a way of patients with MECFS getting out of their MECFS. And graded exercise therapy was exercise graded on a structured, regimented routine and a continued increase in the amount of exercise you do day on day. So every day, a little bit more, next day, a little bit more, next day, a little bit more. Graded exercise, okay, on a, as they say, structured increase, regular increase, i.e. not stopping, asking yourself, and then if you did get into a bit of post-exertional malaise, a bit of crash, a bit of bust, not rein it back. No, got to keep pushing forward. Graded exercise therapy. And basically, it led to a lot of people getting significant and lasting post-exertional malaise. And so consequently, it has been written out of the storyline now. It has been discounted from the NICE guidelines for people getting over MECFS, managing MECFS. So that was in 21. The NICE guidelines basically actively discouraged it. So I wanted to mention that because a lot of people immediately when they hear me talking about slowly building it up, they think, oh my goodness, this is graded exercise therapy. This is a no-no. This is going to take me back to square one. So the answer is, it is not. This brings me quite neatly on to another question that is so frequently asked by both patients, but also people who are sort of taking a casual interest into long COVID. People who don't know about long COVID, they say, well, surely long COVID is the same as MECFS, isn't it? Isn't that the same thing? Well, the answer is no. So long COVID is not the same as MECFS. Let me sort of expand that a little bit more. So long COVID, here we are 5 years on, we've now realized that there are various subgroups of long COVID that are in patients. So patients fall into a number of subgroups, and one of the subgroups is the patients who have had permanent tissue damage. Another subgroup is those patients who have ongoing inflammation in their system throughout the body. Another subgroup is those patients with dysautonomia, so dysfunctional autonomic nervous system. I talked about this in part 1. And then another group, the fourth group, is the patients who have persisting fatigue and malaise. And those are the patients who do look like MECFS. So one group of the long COVID population, one of the 4 groups, yes, do look like MECFS. You could be diagnosed with MECFS, but not the other ones. So the answer to the question is no, long COVID is not the same as MECFS across all patients with long COVID. When we look at the definition of MECFS as sort of described by the Institute of Medicine in 2016, the most recent definition of MECFS, that is basically persisting fatigue for more than 6 months, post-exertional malaise, brain fog, orthostatic problems, so problems with standing up, symptoms when you're standing up, and sleep disturbances. Those are the 5 criteria upon which patients are diagnosed with MECFS. So having heard that, you'll all realize that actually that long COVID has so many other symptoms attached to it. As we know, long COVID has anything up to 200 symptoms. So again, for that reason alone, MECFS, long COVID, they're not the same thing. We do know that fatigue is common after other infections, so post-infectious conditions. So other viruses can lead to this sort of persisting fatigue. And most famously, of course, is Spanish flu in 1918. And that was following on from a influenza A virus, H1N1 virus. That led to a lot of patients, if they survived it, because a lot of people didn't, because we didn't have modern medicine then, but a lot of patients had persisting malaise, and they call it sort of infectious lethargica, and it was a persisting post-viral fatigue, if you like. Likewise, MERS, the other coronavirus, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, in 2012, as I said, another coronavirus like SARS-CoV-2 and SARS-CoV-1, they have showed persisting fatigue. After SARS-CoV-1, that was in 2003, that's the original coronavirus, SARS, they called it. There was a study that was done in Hong Kong when they looked at the patients who'd had the SARS infection in 2003, asked them in 4 years later how they were feeling, and 40% of those still had some persisting symptoms. That's suggesting, a degree of permanence, if not certainty of permanence of their elements of their condition. 30% of those patients could have actually been diagnosed with MECFS on the IOM, Institute of Medicine, criteria for MECFS. So viruses can cause persisting symptoms. Also bacteria. A lot of us have heard of Lyme disease. So Q fever is another one. So Coxiella burnetii is another one that brings about persisting fatigue. Giardia, which is a parasite, so it's the commonest cause for traveller's diarrhea, that can cause persisting symptoms years later. So, like I said, long COVID is not the same as MECFS. It is far more complex than that. But, some people with their long COVID will have a fatigue element more than other features of their long COVID. And so, yes, theoretically, they can be diagnosed with MECFS. So, the fatigue recovery, what can we expect? What do we see? What is our experience? What's my experience having been working in long COVID for 5 years? The collective experience is that there's slow improvement in fatigue, as well as alongside as the other symptoms, slow improvement of your other symptoms of long COVID, as long as there's careful management of those symptoms using the 4 Ps, for example, and the sort of treatments for specific elements of your long COVID your headaches are tackled. Your mast cell activation symptoms are tackled. So your irritable bowel type symptoms are tackled. Along with the management, careful management, it's also really important to, as I've said earlier on, and really emphasize the importance of understanding the whole long COVID process and the causes for it, because that not only sort of, like I said earlier, understanding it, it's helpful for you not only to validate it for other people, the doubters, but also for to give you sort of a grasp on what to expect and those expectations with regard to outcomes and time frame. So, summing up, I've talked, as I said, the causes of fatigue and the reasons why, it's so important, and, the validation. No, it's not all in my head. No, I'm not work shy. Actually, there's medical research evidence to show that there is damage and it can be measured. I've said that, long COVID is not MECFS. It's far more complex than that. Reminding you, long COVID is a multi-causal, multi-symptom, multi-system disease. So consequently, as a result of this, there's no single treatment. There's no silver bullet. We need to treat the fatigue along with it, everything else, like I was saying, those other symptoms, more specific elements of your long COVID. We need to treat sort of general well-being as well, the immune support, and we talk about sort of the dietary side, and we talk about the sleep side, etc. But also we need to accept the reality of long COVID and its outcomes and its time frame. Acceptance is really important. So there we are. That's my update on long COVID fatigue. I hope you found it helpful. As I said at the start, this is an educational series for long COVID sufferers. But remember, my usual disclaimer: any advice or treatment that I've mentioned, please discuss with your doctor. Remember, safety first. So thanks for your feedback. Again, like I said earlier, apologies, no replies from me. I just don't have the time for it. I appreciate your sort of, your feedback though, because it helps me with my future posts. So there we are. Watch out for the next one. So in the meantime, I wish you well in your long COVID recovery. All the very best.